right, I think we're going to get started, and other people will join us as they can. Good afternoon. My name is Gila Franklin Siegel, and I am the Associate Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. As you know, the JCRC is the Public Affairs and Community Relations arm of the Greater Washington Jewish community. We represent more than 100 organizations and synagogues throughout the region. We're pleased to be able to sponsor this conference call briefing today on an issue that is of such critical, moral, emotional, and political importance to the American Jewish community. The imperative to welcome strangers into our midst is an intensely personal one for American Jews, and it is no surprise that we have over 150 participants on today's call from all corners of our local Jewish community. The JCRC has a long history of supporting public policies that protect the rights of refugees and immigrants and that reflect their enormous contributions to American life. Last week, even before the executive orders were signed into law, the JCRC issued a statement strongly opposing this dramatic change in federal refugee policy, and we're delighted to be working with one of the shining gems of our Jewish world, HIAS, to respond to these events by educating our community and providing concrete opportunities for advocacy and action on the ground. So first, a few housekeeping notes. Please be aware that this call is being recorded and it is on the record with reporters registered and listening in. We're pleased to be joined today by Mark Hetfield, President and CEO of HIAS. Mr. Hetfield will speak for approximately 15 minutes, and then we will open the call for Q&A. At that time, if you have a question, please dial *6 on your phone to be added to the queue. Please remember that questions should be kept short and to the point so that we have time for as many people as possible to ask questions. And just a friendly reminder that questions end with a question mark. Subsequent to the Q&A with Mr. Hetfield, my colleague Sarah Beller, HIAS's Community Engagement Director for the Washington, D.C. area, and I will discuss some of the initiatives underway locally to assist refugees and to otherwise respond to this crisis. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Hetfield, President and CEO of HIAS. Mr. Hetfield is an expert in refugee and immigration law, policy, and programs, and he has led HIAS's transformation from an organization focused on Jewish immigrants to a global agency assisting refugees of all faiths and ethnicities. He began his career as a HIAS caseworker in Rome, Italy, assisting Jewish refugee applicants from the Soviet Union, and later rejoined the agency as its Washington, D.C. representative, and again as its Director of International Operations. Between his roles at HIAS, Mark served as Senior Advisor on Refugee Issues at the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, where he directed a congressionally authorized study on the treatment of asylum seekers. In 2016, Mark was named by the Forward newspaper to its annual Forward 50 list of top Jews impacting American life for his leadership role in responding to the Syrian refugee crisis. He has been a prominent voice in responding to the crisis triggered by the signing of the new executive orders last week, and we're grateful to him for taking time during this very intense, busy period to brief our local community. I will now hand the call over to Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. And just for the record, my last name is pronounced Hetfield, not Hatfield. So let me, this has been probably the most difficult and the most difficult week of my professional life, and but it's had its moments of, it's had some very positive moments as well. I want to say that HIAS has undergone two major transformations since I first joined in 1989. One transformation took about 20 years, and the second transformation took a weekend, took the last weekend. So I'm going to go over that too, and then talk about the executive order. So HIAS was established at the end of the 19th century to help Jewish refugees who were fleeing the pogroms in Russia, the anti-Semitic pogroms. And we continued to focus on the resettlement of Jewish refugees throughout the 20th century, basically, culminating in the resettlement of 400,000 Soviet Jews to the United States in the last decade of the 20th century. We then transformed from being an agency that helped refugees because they were Jewish to an agency that helps refugees because we are Jewish. We help refugees because we do it out of Jewish values now. We help refugees of all faiths, all ethnicities, and we do it because we realize that the very existence of the American Jewish community owes itself to America welcoming refugees. There would be no American Jewish community, period, if America did not have a history of welcoming Jewish refugees. And we always think it's important to remind ourselves of that as to why we do the work that we do. Today, HIAS continues to welcome Jewish refugees, but there aren't that many, frankly, so we focus overwhelmingly on welcoming any refugee that needs our assistance. We are one of 9 agencies that worked in close partnership with the United States government. Worked because this was the case until this past Friday. We are the only Jewish agency that works in this way with the U.S. government, although we work in close partnership with Jewish family service agencies and other community-based organizations all around the country to welcome refugees into those communities where we resettle. Last year we resettled over 4,000 refugees across the United States. This year we had been planning on resettling around 5,000, nearly 5,000 refugees across the country. And then, of course, we work closely with the other 8 agencies that are refugee resettlement agencies, 5 of whom are faith-based, 3 of whom are secular. And in addition to that work, we also represent asylum seekers in New York and the Washington, D.C. area. And we provide overseas assistance to refugees in around a dozen countries around the world, including Eastern Europe, Israel, South America, and Africa on those continents, and Central America as well. So we underwent that one transformation I mentioned, which was major for us in terms of who we helped. And the second transformation we underwent started on Friday of this past week. We have been close partners with the United States government, which has been a major funder and collaborator and close partner of ours since the Refugee Act of 1980. And then on the International Holocaust Remembrance Day and on Shabbat, after candlelighting, the President signed his executive order that effectively slams the door in the face of refugees. And the executive order that he signed does this not in one way, but in many ways, just in case anybody was wondering about the intent behind this. Now, first of all, before I talk about how concretely it does that, I just want to mention that if you have any doubts about the intention behind this executive order, if you think this is just to keep welcoming refugees but to make us safe, read the order. Read the first page of the order where it states the purpose of the order. There is not one positive word about refugees in that statement of purpose. There is not one sympathetic word that explains why refugees flee in the first place, why it's important that we accept refugees. That's not in there at all. What is in there? Vile, hateful language about how refugees are against our Constitution, how they pose security threats to this country, how they hate gays and lesbians, how they don't believe in the equality of the sexes. Take a read, how they want to impose Sharia law on us, and how they are just generally going to bring terror to the United States. Read it, and then tell me if you disagree with me. So that's the intent. And then in terms of what it actually does, he decided, well, how many ways can I kill the refugee program? What he did was, A, he stops all refugee processing, all refugee arrivals for 120 days, for everybody. Secondly, he stops not only refugee arrivals, but all arrivals for immigrants as well as tourists, as well as students, as well as other visitors for 90 days if they come from these 7 named countries that are quote-unquote terror-prone. Third, he does an indefinite ban on the resettlement of Syrian refugees, which is the largest group of refugees now being resettled to the United States. And apparently there are no exceptions to that. And he And again, that's indefinite until the president himself repeals it. And then, as if that were not enough, he also empowers governors to have more authority to decide whether or not refugees are resettled in their own states. And as if that were not enough, he decided to lower the refugee admission ceiling from the 110,000 set by President Obama, which frankly is too low given the enormity of the world refugee crisis, to 50,000, which is the lowest that it has been since the Refugee Act of 1980 was first legislated. Less refugees have come in than that in a couple of years after September 11th, but the ceiling was never set that low. And again, this is a ceiling, not a floor, not a target. This is a ceiling. Did he make exceptions? Yes. There are exceptions in this on a case-by-case basis that require sign-off by both the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Secretary of State for non-Muslims. So if you think this is not a Muslim ban, you're wrong. This is a Muslim ban. But unfortunately, Christians and other religious minorities are affected as well because, again, he says that before they were discriminated against. Well, now it's impossible to get in if you're a Muslim from these countries, from these 7 countries. If you're a Christian, you at least have a chance, but it's going to be much harder than it ever was before. And it's still unclear as to whether or not Syrian Christians will be able to get in under the way this is written. So it's an extremely broad and anti-refugee measure. And in theory, it's a pause, and that's what they tell us, that it will start up again. But I have to tell you that we're telling refugees, we're not going to book you on the 121st day for travel, because between now and 120 days, your interview will have expired, your medical clearances will have expired, your security clearances will have expired, and therefore, you will not be ready to travel to the United States after 120 days. You are going to have to basically start this agonizing, years-long sometimes, process from start. Your paper application might still be valid, but that's it. All of the other hoops that you have to jump through, the 18 to 24 months of hoops that President Obama installed and added to, which basically constitute extreme vetting, you will need to start from scratch. Plus all the additional hoops which President Trump plans to implement for extreme vetting, whatever he means by that. And that is still unclear because, again, we have had extreme vetting since 2011 when President Obama added a number of security checks to a process that already had a number of security checks that refugees had to jump through. So this is a very, very serious assault on the refugee program. And not only is it going to have an impact on the refugees who were actually approved to come to the United States or who were in line to come to the United States legally, but it's going to have an impact around the world for all refugees because the United States is a leader on refugee protection. The rest of the world looks to us as an example to follow, and it could be a good example or it could be a bad example. Right now, we are setting a very, very bad example. We have lowered the bar lower than I have ever seen it before from any civilized country. And we have therefore lost all of our credibility to ask any countries, especially the countries that are hosting millions of refugees or hundreds and hundreds of thousands of refugees, to ask them to continue to protect them. So this will bring all refugees into a downward in terms of their losing protection. It's just like in 1921, when the U.S. slammed its doors on refugees, it wasn't just the United States that did it. After the United States did it, this was followed by Canada doing it, by Australia doing it, by South Africa doing it, by all the traditional immigration countries doing it. All the countries that had protected Jews slammed their doors after the United States did. And you're definitely going to see things trending in that same direction. I mean, I cannot overemphasize the gravity of this situation in terms of refugees and human rights. And as if I wasn't appalled enough, yesterday you may have read about President Trump's very unpleasant phone call with the Prime Minister of Australia, which is not known for how well it treats refugees, we had reached a bilateral agreement with them to take some of their refugees who really needed to be resettled out of Australia because of the way Australia was treating them. And he yelled at Australia, not yelled at the Prime Minister, not because of the way the Prime Minister was treating the refugees that he was hosting, which frankly he would deserve a tongue lashing for that, just not from Donald Trump, but because he goes, I don't want these people here. Why am I taking these people? I don't want these people in my country. And that's one of the reasons why the hour-long scheduled call only lasted 26 minutes. So that's the bad news. The good news is that is the response of our community and other communities across the United States. This has been kind of a lonely job, frankly, working at HIAS for the last 28 years because we've been doing all this great work on behalf of the American Jewish community, and not many people noticed that we were doing it. And the level of support we've gotten from across the community, from synagogues, from rabbis, from other Jewish organizations, from all of the movements of Judaism has been absolutely overwhelming and extremely positive, and almost without exception. That support has been very positive, very heartfelt, and we're now up to, I think, over 2,000 rabbis who have signed on to our statement demanding that the U.S. continue to welcome refugees. And all we can do now is draw attention to what our country is doing and what a violation it is of American values, or at least of American Jewish values, and how we will not stand for it. And I just hope that our community can sustain its commitment and its advocacy against this vile, un-American executive order that the President signed on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I will just add one more thing, and that is that we have to remember that the entire Refugee Convention and all international laws that protect refugees today didn't exist during the 1930s and 1940s. They were designed to make sure that never again do countries turn back refugees to their persecutors. And Donald Trump, in a weekend, did more to undermine that Refugee Convention than has been done in the previous 60 years. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
As a reminder, if you would like to be added to the queue to ask a question for Mr. Hetfield, please dial *6 on your phone. One question that I had, this is Gila Franklin-Siegel from JCRC, is working with the interfaith community and how the Jewish community is working with national organizations of other faiths, because that will help our local organizations and give them some direction.
Sure, I'm happy to. Now we have just like we used to have an outstanding relationship with the U.S. government, we still have an outstanding relationship with the many other faith-based agencies that work on this issue. And specifically, so you know who they are, as I mentioned, there are 6 faith-based agencies that work in the refugee program. Those faith-based agencies are, of course, the largest is the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops, which works through local Catholic Charities offices primarily. The Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, or LIRS, which works mainly through Lutheran social service agencies around the country. Episcopal Migration Ministries, which works with Episcopal Church. World Relief, which works through evangelical churches and has operations across the country. Church World Service, which is the representative of the mainline Protestant movement. And then, of course, there's HIAS. So those are the 6 faith-based agencies that work across the country. You will notice that unfortunately there is an absence of an Arab American or a Muslim National Refugee Agency, which is disappointing because they're 50%, nearly 50% of the refugees resettled today, at least prior to Trump's Muslim ban were Muslims. This is not necessarily the fault of that community. The fact is that refugee resettlement takes a lot of infrastructure. And the agencies that were doing it, with only one exception, the list of agencies that were doing it in 1980 is the exact same as the list that are doing it today. It's a very difficult field to break into, given the infrastructure requirements. But we would really like to see a Muslim or an Arab American organization joining the Refugee Council and the agencies that do this work, because we do need Muslim partners and a Muslim voice at the table, or at least Arab American.
Thank you, Mark. We'll go to the next caller.
Good afternoon. My name is Ed Weiss. I'm just a member of the Jewish community in the Washington area. And actually, Mark, you and I believe, met a number of years ago. I'm sure you don't remember me. I do remember you. And I commend the good work that you've been doing these many, many years. I need to ask you a question, and then a follow-up depending upon where the answer goes. Mm-hmm. I sat in on a meeting this morning, an impromptu meeting, at which someone had described to me a letter that they had received, I believe from HIAS, which had a footer, the base of the letter, where they messaged something to the effect of dump Trump or get rid of Trump or something highly critical of Donald Trump. Mark, are you aware of anything that HIAS has issued with that type of message at the bottom of it?
If we did, in fact, issue such a message, that's rather alarming, because we are not a political organization. So if you do actually have such a message like that, I would like you to forward it to us.
Yeah, I don't have it. If I can obtain a copy of it, then I will forward it to you. And that's exactly the response that I was hoping to get. If in fact is that there are many people who may support Trump, but do not Jews who may support Trump, but who absolutely abhor the ban. So to the extent that HIAS does, in fact, what you're saying, which is it is not a political organization, it's a refugee relief organization, then I commend you. And I think you need to reinforce that message, because I think there is some leakage on the penumbra that just kind of oozes out into the community. But again, let me
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to the next caller now.
I would like to say one more thing, though, about that before we do that, because it is important to emphasize that one thing that really makes me recoil is when we are referred to as a progressive organization or as a liberal organization. We are neither of those things. HIAS is about one thing and one thing only, and that's refugees and refugee protection. We have conservative support and liberal support, and it's important for us to maintain, kind of like AIPAC, that bipartisan support of the agency and the agency's work. And refugees have always been a bipartisan issue, and we have never had an issue in transitions from Democratic to Republican or Republican to Democratic administrations. It has always been a change that was one of nuance, not revolution. But you can see why HIAS crosses into, and I can see why the perception would be there that we are anti-Trump, because, again, President Trump has issued the most anti-refugee executive action in the history, since 1921. So I can see why that perception might be projected, but we are totally nonpartisan, and we would love to renew our bipartisan tradition. Okay, next question.
Is there an official starting date for when this procedure was supposed to be effective, so we can determine when the ending date for the 120-day ban is?
It was effective upon signing, and that was one of the worst aspects of the executive. There were so many bad aspects, but that was one of the many bad aspects of the executive order. So you can just count from. I haven't bothered counting yet, but you can just count from January 25th, and it should be 120 days past that. But as I said, don't expect the refugees to start arriving in large numbers on day 121. And just to emphasize one thing I did not mention is it didn't matter if you were en route to the United States at that time. Most refugees who were actually en route to the United States or most non-refugees were turned away by the time they arrived, or were turned away from planes and weren't allowed to make their connections, was more frequent. Some were ultimately allowed in. There were the court orders that were helpful in terms of that, but many refugees just simply didn't make it on the planes to make their connecting flights because the airlines were under strict orders that they would be fined if they brought in people from the 7 countries, even if they were holding valid U.S.-issued visas and valid approval notices. And I spent my Shabbat trying to help a Syrian woman. She was a young Syrian woman with a 5-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old daughter, hadn't seen the husband/father for over 2 years. They were living as refugees together in Jordan. He somehow got to the United States, got political asylum, went through all the legal channels, got clearances for his wife and 2 young little daughters to join him. They had all the necessary approval notices. They got on the plane in Amman. The president signed the notice while they were on flight from Amman to Kiev. They were not allowed to make their connection in Kiev, and they were then turned away back to Amman. I did manage, through the work of, frankly, a lot of journalists and one particular angel that I cannot mention, to get those Syrians approved to come into the United States so they could join the father. I can't tell you how much work that took, and those are the only Syrians who will be allowed in. They're arriving today, who have been allowed in since Friday night. So it was that's a long way of saying it was effective immediately on January 25th and count from then.
Next question, please.
Hi, Rabbi Fred Sherlander-Dobb at Adat Shalom in Bethesda, one of the many communities that has been a welcoming congregation through HIAS and really appreciates the work you're doing. Kol hakavod, including how you spent your Shabbat. That's pikuach nefesh, and we really appreciate it. Shout out to Sarah Beller and the other local organizers who have said that for communities like ours working through Lutheran social services to help resettle families, that HIAS was working on becoming kind of a first-tier placement group that may be academic at this point, but I'm wondering where that stands, and B, just at the tachlis brass tacks level, what else you would recommend for particularly congregational leaders, professional and lay in the area, some of the next steps that we can each do.
I'll start, then I'll have Sarah finish. So I will say we definitely wanted to reopen a refugee site in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. We were planning on doing that. But as you can see, the State Department's not exactly in an expansive mode at the moment. So we are going to have to just encourage synagogues to continue their partnerships with LSS and other organizations like IRC that do resettle refugees in the D.C. area. We will probably see our own network shrink rather than grow because of this order and the long-term lowering of numbers, which we're expecting to take place over the next 4 years. Sarah, do you want to pick up?
Sure. Thanks, Rabbi Fred. Actually, Gila, I was wondering if this would be a good time for me to talk about the range of action opportunities in D.C. to help answer Rabbi Fred's question. How does that sound, Gila?
That's fine. JCRC and HIAS have been working together this week to provide as many resources as possible to synagogues and other organizations in our area, which is how this conference call came about. And I know that Sarah wants to speak about a whole bunch of action items that can be resources for everybody immediately. I also wanted to let everyone who's on the call know that JCRC is working with HIAS to put together a training and education session, really more like a half-day workshop that will provide best practices for synagogues and other organizations who are in this area and who are interested in engaging on this issue, because not every project is going to be right for every congregation, but we for sure want to see everybody engaging in some way. So with that, I am going to pass it off to my colleague Sarah to give you more specifics about what HIAS is recommending at this point.
Great. Thanks, Gila. And so I'm the Community Engagement Director for the Greater DC area at HIAS. My name is Sarah Beller. Nice to meet all of you. So in the wake of this executive order, this is not a time to despair. It's really a time for action. It's a moment nationally when the Jewish community is stepping up our grassroots advocacy on this issue. And in the Greater Washington, D.C. area, there are a number of ways to be part of these efforts. I want to outline 9 things you and your communities can do at this time. So number 1 is to contact your member of Congress, particularly if you are a Maryland or Virginia resident. Call them, let your views be known. We have some resources on that. For congregations, we're also offering a phone training on how to have an in-person meeting with your member of Congress on this issue, and those trainings will be tomorrow at noon and Tuesday at 3 p.m. And through Gila, we'll send out some information so you can follow up on that. Number 2 is to send a message to the Trump administration about your opposition, if you feel that way, to this executive order. Go to hias.org/take-action to sign that message. 3, we need to be amplifying and connecting with each other through social media. So you can share the HIAS blog post called How to Stand Up and Fight Back for Refugees. That also has 9 things listed in it. You can share that on your Facebook or Twitter feed and join the Facebook group we've recently started called Jews for Refugees. Number 4, for rabbis, if you haven't already, join the 2,000 rabbis who have signed a letter in support of welcoming refugees and of continuing and not rolling back the refugee program. For congregations, again, if you haven't already, we have over 25 in the D.C. area that have joined the HIAS Welcome campaign and over 250 around the country that have stated their support for refugees and committed to educating their communities and to taking action. Here in the D.C. area, we can also offer speakers to come and educational resources to engage your congregations. Number 6, for lawyers. If your law firm is interested in working on challenging the executive orders, please let us know, and we can help you tap into that. As far as individual lawyers, we see asylum seekers here in our Silver Spring office, and we're looking for pro bono attorneys. Number 7, for people in their 20s and 30s, this Monday at 6th and I Synagogue, we're going to be holding a meeting for young professionals to discuss how we can speak out for refugees at this time, and you can find that information on the HIAS events page. Number 8, stay tuned. We are hoping, but not confirmed yet, to hold a Jewish community action for refugees in the next coming few weeks, and that'll be in the D.C. area, and we hope all of you will join once that's confirmed. And finally, number 9, save the date for Wednesday, March 29th for a Jews for Refugees assembly. And that will be joining together with the full D.C. Jewish community, along with the JCRC and lots of other organizations, as a powerful gathering with refugee speakers, policy experts, and community leaders. And there will be a chance for congregations and organizations to add their support to the event and to bring delegations. So we hope you'll all be there, and mark your calendars for March 29th. This is really a moment for the Jewish community to stand up for our values, and we know that our voice matters now. We've heard Senator Dick Durbin talk about our rabbi letter from the floor of the Senate, and we know that when we speak out, it is heard. This is a crucial moment right now, and there will be more coming down the pike. Things are changing quickly, so the best way for the Jewish response to this crisis is to sign up for updates on the HIAS website, and we hope you'll all join us in speaking out and being part of the community of Jews for refugees.
Thank you, Sarah. We're going to go to the next call now. We have time for a couple more calls.
Hello, Andrew Apostolou here. I wanted to clarify, what is the exact status of the executive order? I was at Dulles Airport on Sunday, and the CBP were brazenly defying Judge Leonie Brinkhamer's order to stay aspects of the executive order. I've seen similar reports that CBP were not complying at JFK. And then just on a secondary point, Section 3 of the executive order, I think, makes it pretty clear that this ban is permanent for some countries because it requests that the governments of these countries provide information on their citizens. And having worked with Iranian dissidents and refugees, I can tell you they do not want the Islamic Republic giving information to the U.S. government. But what is the status of the EO right now?
Well, the status is that if you aren't actually on a plane, you have no hope of getting here. I mean, if you are actually able to get on a plane, and again, people are turning you away, the airlines are turning you away. You're out of luck. It's only for people who actually arrive that are benefiting at all from the executive order. Everybody's been instructed that they need to demand asylum and state of fear of return in order to make sure they're not put on a plane that's gone back. And again, this all happens, like all of the entire inspections process at these airports is incredibly opaque. You don't have the right to bring a lawyer in or anything else, though there are a lot of lawyers there that want to help. They're not being given access. So that's also an issue. The Boston ruling, for example, was broader and actually applied to people who were not yet in the United States, but that's not the way that it's being interpreted by Homeland Security or by CBP. So basically, the only thing that's really changed in the executive order is that, A, they're now letting in lawful permanent residents, people with green cards, big deal. That should have been obvious from the get-go. But B, at first they were allowing in Afghan special immigrant visa holders, but not Iraqi special immigrant visa holders. Now, special immigrant visa holders are people who, by definition, worked closely or fought alongside of the United States government in the Iraq incursion as well as the Afghanistan intervention. They were entitled to visas because they are refugee-like. Their lives are certainly in danger in Afghanistan and Iraq. They did not allow the Iraqis to come in, but that has been changed. So now Iraqi special immigrant visa holders are allowed to come in. They also decided that they were going to allow in refugees who were in transit, who were supposed to arrive this week, will be allowed to arrive this week unless they're from one of the 7 countries that were named. So only refugees who are not on that list, whose countries were not on that list, will be allowed to arrive. And for example, HIAS processes refugees for resettlement in Israel, resettlement to the United States. We have Sudanese as well as Eritrean clients. The Eritreans were allowed to travel. The Sudanese were not. Blatant discrimination on the basis of nationality. So that's basically where it stands. We're going to continue to challenge the order. HIAS may be the party to a lawsuit against the executive order in cooperation with the ACLU. So that the legal challenges will continue to be mounted.
Thank you, Mark. Next question, please.
I wonder if any of the predominantly Muslim countries accept refugees and in substantial numbers.
Yeah, the large, I mean, unfortunately, it is true that the majority of refugees in the world are now Muslim. The Muslims tend to Muslim countries and ISIS in particular tend to persecute Muslims, other Muslims. And and yes, in fact, Muslim countries have been overwhelmingly generous up until now. Countries like Lebanon and Jordan have accepted so many Syrian refugees that it's become that a substantial portion of their population, like 1 in every 4 people in Lebanon, is now actually Syrian. Turkey, while it's a much larger country, has literally accepted over 2 million refugees from Syria. So Egypt as well has accepted a very significant number of refugees from Syria. So a number of the predominant responsibility for the refugees from Syria has in fact been carried by Muslim countries. There, of course, then is the contrast of the countries, the Gulf state countries, which have done very little for this refugee population. And I actually pointed that out at a conference I was at last year and got assaulted by a number of refugees, verbally assaulted, who said, why would we want to escape one gross human rights violator to go to another? And I had to accept that point as being a valid one.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to go to the next question.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, hi. This is Rabbi Mindy Portnoy. My question, Mark, is how does this affect the program regarding unaccompanied minors from Central America? Does this have anything to do with that, who are seeking refugee status?
Yes, that's also been suspended. That's subject to the 120-day suspension, and it's because not only did they've also suspended the use of parole authority on the way that it was being applied in the Central American Minors Program. So yeah, that certainly as well has been suspended at least for the 120-day period.
Okay, thank you.
We have time for just a couple more questions. Please go ahead.
This is Helen Sonnenschein. I don't know, is it my turn?
Yes.
My question is, since several of the Republicans in Congress had opposed many of Trump's ideas when he was a candidate, and we have basically undivided government, that is, there's no checks or balances. What is the possibility of the refugee organizations speaking personally to some of the leadership in the Republicans in Congress, respectfully, of course, to see what can be done to make changes, since we obviously don't seem to have any sway with regard to the administration, but there were many that did oppose these policies, people like Rubio and possibly Paul Ryan and others who have responsible positions.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. In fact, we were talking about that yesterday, and we would like to see, and we will be working on bipartisan legislation to try to resolve this issue. That would come up with a solution other than the one that was put forward by Trump on Friday night. In fact, there was legislation that was recently introduced by Congressman Chris Smith that would have truly assisted Christian refugees from the Middle East. Like, in other words, it would have helped Christians from the Middle East get better access to the refugee program without depriving others of access to the refugee program. And what the executive order has done, as I said earlier, is it has made it more difficult for Christian refugees to get access to the refugee program, just not quite as difficult as it is for Muslims. So, in fact, we are going to pursue some kind of bipartisan legislation. But I have to say, I've been really shocked at the lack of courage that we're seeing from Republican members of Congress and Republicans in the Senate vis-a-vis this executive order. But my understanding is that many of them are actually quite disturbed by it and would like to find an alternative path. So we will be working with them.
We're going to go to our last call.
Hi, my name is Shruti, and actually I wanted to share something. One of the things that was said earlier was about involving the Muslim groups. And yesterday I was at this, on January 31st, I was in Rockville at an event that was hosted by Montgomery County. And Mike Mitchell from HIAS was one of the people who spoke. But there is a Muslim group who's been working to help with resettlement of Syrian refugees and refugees in general, I believe. It's called the Montgomery County Muslim Foundation. and there was a speaker from there called Abdul Sheikh who shared success stories about 3 families that they have just resettled for work, but one family recently in the past 1 week that they have resettled in Montgomery County. So I just wanted to share that, and I'd be happy to email that information, so you might want to connect with them and see how maybe they can support the work that you're doing and have a Muslim representation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And we should connect offline.
Absolutely.
So we're going to wrap up our call now. I want to thank Mark and Sarah again for taking the time to speak with our community, and I want to thank all of you for joining us, such a huge crowd. We are going to upload the recording of this call to the JCRC website, which can be found at www.jcouncil.org, and also on social media. In addition, we will be sending out the information that Sarah and I spoke about regarding local engagement on this issue. And we encourage you, as per what Sarah said about the importance of social media and keeping up the intensity, we encourage you to share all of this information with friends, with colleagues, and if you belong to a synagogue or another religious congregation, to share it in that forum as well. And HIAS and JCRC are here to answer any questions that you have and help to connect you with the people you can be connected to if you want to be further engaged on this. So thank you again, everybody, and we wish you all a good afternoon.